You are tuned into Mostly Humans. The opinions and views shared by the hosts of this podcast are uniquely their own and do not reflect the view or opinions of the companies they work for. P.S. Don't sue or fire us. Thanks so much. Now let's get into the episode. His preferred cooking oil is grapeseed oil because the flash point is different and it won't burn you.
Justin, if we start talking about seed oils, we're going to have a riot on this channel. That is like the hottest topic in our country is seed oils. So we're going to have to save that for a day where we want to lose half of our audience.
I don't condone the use of seed oils. All right, welcome back to Mostly Humans, an AI and business podcast for everyone. We break down complex topics and the latest in AI to benefit you, the everyday person, and help showcase how these tools can impact your business operations today. I'm Justin Wright. I'm joined by my co-host, Matt Bigelow. Matt, how you doing today?
Doing pretty well. There was a small crisis that unfolded that I didn't tell you about before we pressed record, that it seems to be mitigated by Riverside, which is the great application that we use for this podcast. And that is I took a huge chunk out of my beard in this ish region. And I know a lot of people probably aren't watching the video version of this. But thanks to the visual effects on Riverside, you can't tell. My wife is out of town, thankfully. No one here to ridicule me, but it's really not good. And I have to ask, I've never asked you this question before. Do you have a beard routine? Do you just like let it go one length and you hit it? Or do you try to do the fade like I do? Because this didn't work out good today.
Yeah, honestly, I couldn't tell. So I'm actually, kudos to Riverside appearance enhancement or whatever is going on there. But we are not sponsored yet. But if you want to sponsor us, Riverside, let us know. So the beard routine. So I've done many things over the years. Now what I kind of do is I'll try to fade out the edges, and we're going with the like Leonidas beard right now, you know? So for anybody who's not watching the video, it's way more impressive in your mind. I want you to really picture a very impressive
and picture
beard.
the 12 abs if it's Leonidas.
Yes, all of the abs, so many abs. But so do a little fade on the side, and then honestly I just kind of comb it down and I trim it raw with just the shears and kind of like angle it up a little bit and hope for the best, and then my barber shakes his head when I go see him and fixes it for me.
See? Okay, so that's where I went wrong today. I normally will like take a clipper with a guard, you know, for anyone who has not cut their hair before or is not a man who hasn't got this type of cut. You know, the clippers that you buzz everything with, like you can put different shortness lengths on them. So normally I'll do like longer here and then less long on the way out, right? Today I did what you said. I just went raw with the shears and I was like, I'm just gonna eyeball this thing and like and then went and the second it happened, I was like, oh my God, we're recording in like 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's tough. But again, couldn't tell.
Yeah, in person, there's a big gap here. But thanks to this whatever airbrushing effect it is, it looks like I have a normal beard.
There you go. Hey, shout out to normal beards. So speaking of Leonidas, you'll like this. So Matt and I are both avid gym goers. And so I think it was 5 years ago when this feat was first done, and it piqued my interest, but the timing wasn't right. And I saw the video got shared again on social media recently, but there's a challenge that came from the CrossFit community. And 5 years ago, this guy, Adam Klink, did a sub 5-minute mile and a 500-pound back squat in the same day, so in the same 24-hour period. And I have decided that I am embarking on this challenge and started the training program this week. And my running needs a lot of work, so we'll see if I can do it, but I'm looking forward to it. The next like 4 or 5 months, I have a training blog laid out. And if anybody listening to the podcast wants to follow along and get better at squatting and running, I will send you the exact program that I am following for the next 5 months.
Our worlds are colliding. So for those who don't know, Justin was a professional CrossFit athlete, still probably could be if he wasn't doing all things AI. But I've been into like hybrid training for a while, which is combination of like hypertrophy, bodybuilding, working out, whatever, meets endurance. Adam Klink because I don't know any CrossFitters. I know like three. I know like Rich Froning, you, and Adam Klink. But
There
I
you
know
go.
Adam because Adam's a hybrid guy who has done a lot of the endurance stuff, like 100-mile ultras and stuff like that. So I actually know who you're talking about. That is a crazy endeavor. What is your like one rep max on squat right now? Because mine is probably I'm gonna make an excuse about an injury I had, but mine is very, very low. Like very low. Like most people can bench more than I can squat. So, but like, what is yours right now? I'm sure it's insane.
Well, historically it was 485. So I never touched 500, but I got close. Now it's probably like 430. I'm dad mode. You know, the legs aren't as strong as they used to be. But so the good thing about strength is it comes back. If you built it, it actually comes back fairly quickly if you train the right way. Like, you know, for anybody who former athletes, whatever, they can get it back fairly quickly. The running is what I'm more worried about because my fastest mile is I think just under 520 ever, and that was when I was wrestling, and I was a very different human then. So we'll see. It's going to be a fun journey either way. We'll see what happens, but I'm feeling a little beat up today, but that's okay.
Both of those feats are insane. I will follow along, and I will like to get some outside of the show advice from you because a 5 minute mile for those who like haven't ran a mile in a long time, you know, like haven't done it since like high school, that's crazy. Like, it's really, really fast. And obviously 500 pounds squat sounds crazy, but also like since you're like a CrossFit type of person, I think your version of squat is also a lot different than most people listening. Most people listening do a squat and they're like, I bent my knees and I went back up. It's done. And you're like ass to grass type of situation, I assume.
Well, I also hope that when I bend my knees, I get back up. That's one of the things we're dealing with these days. You know, there's always a chance. There's always a chance. But it's funny that you know Adam. He's a stud. So if Adam Klink ever listens to this podcast, shout out Adam. You're a strong, very fit man.
Yeah, like he's done some crazy endeavors. So I like that he threw down the gauntlet. I wish you well on this, and I will be rooting you on, man.
I appreciate that. And again, open invite. Anybody listening to the podcast, if you want to get better at squatting and running, I'll send you the exact program that I'm doing. But enough about beards and fitness and the movie 300. This week, I know we were super excited to talk about this. You sent me a really cool clip that we'll get into from another podcast that I've been thinking about since you sent it to me. But we're going to talk about what are agents, right? You hear the term thrown around a lot now. There's a bunch of different protocols for agent communication, which we'll get into in a different episode. But as you define them, I think maybe we'll start with that. What is an AI agent as you think about it?
I'm glad that you said like as I think about it, because there's a lot of different definitions out there. I think most of them are correct, by the way. I'll tell you what an agent isn't to start.
Ooh,
so
nice.
An agent isn't a chat bot that we all interface with like ChatGPT, Gemini, Anthropic. Those are large language models. So actually, let's take one step back. Something we haven't covered in any of these episodes is there are companies that build and train large language models. Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, so on and so forth, Mistral. Then those same companies who can sell that large language model to other companies to do fun things with also wanted us as consumers to be able to access the large language model. So then they built an application on top of it called ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, right? So when we interface with the chat layers that the LLM providers have built on top of it so that we can access it, that is definitely not an agent. And I think a lot of people do get that all mixed up. And in the last like year and a half or so, people are calling things agentic, inferring that they are an AI agent or that they can do agent things, and they can't. And I think the big difference, the way I see it, the simplest form of what is the difference between a chat bot or a chat interface for an LLM and an agent is that an agent can actually do stuff, right? So these large language models have been trained on lots of data, most of the internet, and they know answers to lots of things, and they can search the web, which is like semi-agentic, but I think we could draw the line and say it's still not agentic. An agent can actually do things like, hey, I want you to go to my calendar and tell me when I'm free to have drinks with Justin next time I'm in Boston, and
Please.
book the invite. Yes, we will discuss squats and book it with Justin. This is his email, and it just does it. So I think when an agent uses tools, different systems that aren't its chat interface itself, and can go do a thing, that's when I draw the line personally and say, okay, we're in agent land now. Well, how do you see it?
Yeah, no, I think that I totally agree. I think the key differentiator there is ChatGPT can access your calendar now, and it can tell you information about it. It can say, analyze this and let me know when I have free time, or give me information about this thing, even web search, to your point. But agents have to be able to do things autonomously or on their own. And I know you're probably thinking to yourself, I really wish I had the official Google Cloud definition of an agent, so I'm going to read it to you right now. An AI agent is a software system that uses artificial intelligence to autonomously perform tasks on behalf of users, demonstrating reasoning, planning, and memory capabilities. And then further, it says that they can make decisions, learn, and adapt, and they can work with other agents to complete complex workflows. So the key thing here is an agent is basically like if you give an employee who works for you a task and you say, hey, I want you to make this report on this thing, here's where the data is, whatever. An agent is essentially taking that role. They're taking the instructions that you give, maybe the information that you give them in addition to those instructions, but they're able to actually reason through that and kind of give it their best shot. So based on what you've told them, they're actually trying to do the thing on their own. So it's that autonomous piece that I think is important, where it's you give it some instructions, but it is deciding the best way to execute and perform the task versus just giving you an answer or a response, right? Like that's how I think about it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, what Google said. That's what an agent is.
Yeah.
Episode over.
Listen to Google.
Although I do sense, we'll talk about this probably in a future episode, they have the agent-to-agent protocol. And I sense at the end of that definition there, they were kind of trying to incent us to want to use A to A.
Hey, listen, if you have a product to get people to buy it, why not? Yeah.
Right? Well, we'll talk about what A to A is in future episodes. I think like many of us have actually just tried with a ChatGPT or anything that is a chat layer, and we've said like, do this thing for me, like schedule a haircut for my dog or a grooming for my dog. I call it a haircut because my dogs have nicer hair than I do.
Mine does too, and she hates getting haircuts. I don't know how your dogs.
They're fine until they start clipping the nails. Then all bets are off.
Yeah.
That's when we get calls from the groomer. So I think like we've tried, right? We've been like, hey, like book a grooming for my dog or whatever. And it's like, well, I can't actually do that. Like, I think that's the best example for our listeners who are just trying to understand, like, where does the agent line? It's like when you try to tell it to go do a thing outside of the platform and it tells you that it can't do that or doesn't have access to that to be able to do that. That's where you go from like a large language model chat layer to an agent. And I think one of the things that I would want to ask you for the benefit of the listeners is like, do you think an agent needs to have tools to be considered an agent? And then also like, can you talk to people a little bit about how we give access to tools for agents?
Yeah, I think that's a really good distinction. Well, so high level, right? An agent needs to be able to do things as we have now established and as Google has verified for us, right? So the way that it does things is with these tools. So think of tools as, actions or these actual things that your agent is doing. Without access to tools, even if it has the capability to do stuff, it's not going to be able to, right? So I do think that, tools and agents go hand in hand. Like if you're claiming that something is agentic and that it can, take action on your behalf, it has to then also be able to do the things, because it can have all the capabilities in the world, but if you don't give it access to systems or it doesn't have the ability to do stuff, then, technically it is an agent because it can do it, but it needs those permissions. And there's a lot of these platforms like ChatGPT agent is now a thing where you can actually basically give it permission to access your Google Calendar or Google Drive or early pre-AI stuff like Zapier basically allows you to connect different systems together so you can do stuff. And so the basic way that you can play around with this stuff is a lot of agentic tools are going to have out of the box some means of connecting to other systems. Now, authorization, not to go too deep down the rabbit hole, but sometimes it happens where there's like a token, which is basically a secret password that you generate in an app, and then you give that secret password to another app, and now it can access that app. But even now, if you've ever used like Google Login, for example, you sign up for a website and it lets you log in with your Google account. That's basically it's what we call OAuth. It's another form of authorization where you don't have to manually generate this like secret password, basically. So a lot of these agentic apps now are using some form of OAuth or some thing where you basically, like, you're logged into your Google, you click connect, and it says, hey, are you sure you want to let us access your Google Calendar? You say yes, and now it gives it the ability to, maybe schedule something on your calendar or whatever. So a lot of these tools have those basic workflows built in now to make the user experience a little bit better, but essentially it requires some level of permission. Like you connect it, and then you have to confirm that yes, you want it to connect to whatever application. And again, I think the easiest way to think about it is, if anybody has used that Google login or sign up with my Apple ID or whatever for a service, that's probably the most common use of this, in my opinion.
Got it. I think that's a smart way to think about it. I mean, I think the layman's term of what Justin was describing is like, I know how to fry an egg on a frying pan. And I bet Justin has a kitchen, and I bet he's got a stovetop.
I certainly do.
I know how to get in there. If I could find the olive oil, the pan, whatever your preference is, butter. Which one are you? Are you a butter guy?
I like to go butter and oil, a little bit of both. Bit of both. You don't want the butter to burn, but olive oil by itself will splash up, and sometimes you get the little arm burns. You don't want that either. So a little bit of both. Not
realize that it does that. That's excellent information. Now, if I wanted to fry an egg in your home, you would have to give me access to your home. Otherwise, it's breaking and entering, and then access to the kitchen, and you tell me where the stuff is, and then I can go ahead and do it. What's super interesting about these large language models is that because they know so much about human history, you don't have to give them like a ton of advice if you could just give them access to the home and point them to the stove, right? So like if you give an agent access to a calendar, it knows what to do with that information for the most part. I think one of the things that people don't know about agents, like for example, I was watching the news with my wife, and I think a lot of people are not aware, these broadcasters definitely weren't, on on a major news network. They were talking about how one of these AI platforms went rogue the other day, and it was doing crazy things and saying crazy, terrible things, and it was really sad. And the broadcasters are talking to each other, clearly not AI folks, but they're our target market. Like we want to educate them, we want to help them. They're like, some hackers must have went in there and hacked the system and wrote all this code. Like, and again,
they're hackers.
And they're picturing people click-clacking on keyboards and green cursors and a black background, like we talked about, like Terminator style, like getting in there doing hacking. And I turned to my wife and I was like, I mean, it's just a back-end prompt. Someone definitely went into the back-end prompt and said something wrong to the machine. But that's why it did what it did. And I think one of the things I would love for you to help the listeners understand is, okay, you have this large language model. You give it access to a tool like your calendar and your Gmail. We'll keep it simple for now. And then perhaps it doesn't know exactly how you want it to interact with your calendar. It knows it has access. It has read and write access. So you could probably ask it a question right away, like, what's on the calendar for the rest of the day? It could probably tell you. But let's say you wanted to do more nuanced things with your calendar. How does that get set up? How does somebody take that agent and make it do things the way they want it to? Are people coding stuff? Is that where engineers come in, or is it simpler than that?
Simpler than that. And I like your cooking analogy because I would highly encourage you all to not commit breaking and entering. It's a serious crime. But so if you think about, to take it back to that point, right? Like, not only do LLMs know how to fry an egg, but LLMs are essentially like Chef Robert Irvine. Like, they are it is essentially the top chef, like Gordon Ramsay, Robert Irvine. And fun fact about Robert Irvine, aside from Restaurant Impossible, which is a guilty pleasure show of mine, his preferred cooking oil is grapeseed oil because the flash point is different and it won't burn you.
Justin, if we start talking about seed oils, we're going to have a riot on this channel. That is like the hottest topic in our country is seed oils. So we're going to have to save that for a day where we want to lose half of our audience.
I don't condone the use of seed oils. Robert Irvine likes grapeseed oil. Anyways, moving on. But so essentially LLMs have the ability to have the knowledge of some of the top chefs or top mathematicians or top scientists or whatever, but it has all of this knowledge, right? Of all of these things, of all of humanity, of everything on the internet. When we talked about hallucinations, right? It's because it has everything ever written, there's a chance that it's going to say some weird stuff because people write weird things. And so what you're describing is essentially a prompt, right? Is we want to give the LLM or the agent specific instructions for how to perform its task. In the same way that, you could hire the most capable person to work for you. But if it's their first day on the job, you probably have an employee onboarding manual. There's probably some information about the systems that you use and maybe some quirks or some, hey, when you're logging into this thing, this is the step-by-step guide. This is how we access this system of record. We use Salesforce, so we have some obscure, impossible to configure thing over here that we've set up. And so there's instructions that you would give to an employee, no matter how talented they are.
Yeah.
Think of LLMs as the same thing, or agents as the same thing, where you want to give it some baseline instructions. And in terms of basic techniques that work really well, every LLM responds differently. For anybody who really wants to get into the nitty-gritty with prompting, all of the major providers, so OpenAI, Anthropic, etc., they've essentially written prompting guides for their language models that kind of give you examples of how to do certain things. I think those are super helpful for the viewers if they want to really dig into it. But essentially, you want to tell it how to behave. So to go back to the cooking example, you would tell it like, hey, you are an award-winning chef, or you are a Michelin star chef. You're letting it know who it is right away because it has the ability to be that, but you don't want it to be cooking eggs as an astronaut or a scientist. You want it to lean into the knowledge about cooking that it has. And then you probably want to give it some basic instructions about how you like your eggs cooked. Do you like them over hard, over medium? Do you want them scrambled, whatever it is? So you're giving it some guardrails to narrow the focus of what it does. Because just giving it access to your apartment, it may try to clean and cook and do all this other stuff. It may decide to interior decorate and rearrange your apartment, which you probably wouldn't want, right? So you don't want to just give it access and let it run wild. You want to tell it specifically what you want it to do. And that's really the fundamental basis of prompting. And to address your other point, this is not code. This is plain language. In the same way that you would instruct a human, that's how you should think about instructing an agent or a language model that you're in.
So we've talked on the pod a lot about typing stuff into the box. And that's like the front end experience for me and you when we want to get questions answered from Claude or Gemini. Is the back end prompting of an agent, which again, all this stuff just sounds spooky and scary and technical. Is it any different, or is it just another box where you type in text? Like if you wanted it to cook the egg, maybe we shouldn't use a physical analogy. But you know what? Screw it. We're sticking with the physical analogy. It can't actually cook eggs, but it can definitely advise you on how. We're sticking with that analogy for today. If you didn't want it to use salt and pepper, you just wanted just the egg to be cooked perfectly, but no condiments. Would you have to do weird stuff in the back end of this agent to make that happen? Or do you literally type, never cook the egg with salt and pepper?
Exactly that. And there's a lot of the agents that exist today that have been built for specific purposes. They have what we call a base prompt or a core prompt, if you will, where if an agent has been created by a company for, as a legal assistant, let's use a more technical, I guess, example, right? A legal assistant. There is a base prompt for that agent, which somebody else has typed into a box and has basically saved to that agent so that it knows anytime somebody is using me for a task, I am focused on legal assistance, I have XYZ knowledge, this is how I should generally respond. And that's built into the core part of the product. So anybody who has built an agent for a specific task, all they've done, again, is type into the box, but they have attached some specific instructions to that agent that are relevant for what it's meant to do. And the benefit of a lot of this stuff is it doesn't take code to make the agents behave a certain way. When it comes to actually connecting different systems and whatever, yeah, there's code happening. There's fundamental pieces of this that require software, but the actual behavior and the general persona of these agents is really just tied to plain English instructions that somebody typed into a box.
In a way, like, I guess I'm the analogy guy today, but in a way, it's like the AI knows pretty much everything that's ever been written, and it knows how to do that stuff really well. And as you mentioned before, if you don't tell it, hey, I need you to narrow your focus a little bit, then you run the risk of it doing things that you don't want to do, or just not doing it the way that you want. It's kind of like giving an actor a script, right? Brad Pitt has been many people on camera. I actually don't know anything about Brad Pitt. I feel like I know him really well because I've seen all of his movies and stuff, but he's always just playing a role. Is he Tyler Durden, or is he this like Formula One guy, right? I haven't seen that one yet, but it looks cool. Heard good things.
I'm seeing it tomorrow. Tomorrow. We'll report back.
You'll have to tell us on our next pod how it is. He still looks like he's 25. Got to figure out what he's eating. Definitely not seed oils.
No seed oils for him.
But I think like you give him a script and you say, hey, Brad, I know you know how to do lots of things. You have different ranges of emotion, whatever. Your character in this Formula One race, like he's like stoic, right? And he's angry about this and whatever. And you have to bring that out. I know you have all this other range. We're doing this for this character. And so all you have to do to build an agent, a very simple one, is give it access to a tool. And I guess I'm asking you, give it access to a tool. There's a back-end prompt somewhere, which is just a text box. It sounds scary, but it's not. You type in, I want you to do this. I don't want you to do that. You press save. And then I guess my next question for you is like, when do people access agents? Like, is it always via a chat, or do agents sometimes like do things? Like, do they lie in wait and wait for, okay, if this happens over here, always do this? Like, how does the agent actually start like actually doing stuff?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And the answer is it could be all of the above or any of the above, right? So these agentic browsers are getting more popular, right? So everybody listening has probably used Google Chrome or Safari, or hopefully not Microsoft Edge, but you probably have a browser of choice, right? Like there's some thing that you use to access the internet. And historical browsers all had some basic capabilities. You can bookmark pages. They have the ability to render whatever stuff is happening on this cool web page that you're navigating. But these agentic browsers are getting popular because you can give them instructions and it can do stuff in the background. So let's say you want to take a trip and you want to compare flights, and you say, hey, if you find a flight, a round trip for this location under $200 or whatever, or under $300, I want you to book it for me. My card's on file, all that stuff. And none of the individual components of this are new. Like you can save your card info to your browser for, quick shopping. You can navigate all of this stuff. But the ability to put all these pieces together and happen, autonomously in the background, that's new. But in that case, maybe you're providing an instruction or an initial instruction, but the agents then have the ability to kind of do all of the steps necessary to complete that task. So that might mean that they're monitoring that travel site to see if different flights fit your criteria, which then, allows them to do the next thing. But the cool thing about AI and agents in general is the old way of doing things is you had to set up very specific rules and instructions. You had to say, hey, if this happens, then do this. And if this happens, then do this. We've all called in somewhere where it's like, press 1 for this department, press 2 for this, whatever. It's a very rigorous flow. And if you accidentally press the wrong number, which I do all the time, then you can't figure out how to get back to the main menu, and it's this entire situation, right? But agents get rid of the need to do any of that stuff. You give them some rules or some instructions. You say, hey, here's who you are. Here's your task. Here's what I want you to do. You give them access to the systems where those things live. And they can do the reasoning themselves without you having to spell out every specific step. You don't have to be like, first, I want you to go to the flight page. Then I want you to browse the flight page. Then I want you to look at the prices. Then you need to compare the prices. And if this price is lower than this, like all of that logic goes away because the LLM is as capable as a human doing the same task. And I think that is maybe the big unlock or the cool part here for a lot of people.
Yep. Because I think otherwise, some terms that people might know who are listening to this would be like workflow. Like people have been building workflows that connect systems with rules for a long time. There's a whole industry built on that called robotic process automation, which also sounds really scary and really intense when it's really just workflows for enterprises, right? And I think like, in previous episodes, if you haven't checked them out, you should, where we kind of talk about some of the basics. So we're going to assume that you know that, like the probabilities of LLMs is how you can just kind of tell it once you give it access to the travel website, let's say, and your calendar, hey, I just want you to kind of go do this and check this out for me and keep an eye on it for me. And you don't have to give it all of these rules, which would be impossible to create because things would break. And it'll now just actually go and get that done. And that's how like we've entered a new world, I think, with agents. Because if you're saying to yourself, I feel like systems have been hooked up to other systems for the longest time. Like if someone steps up to my front door and I have a Ring doorbell, I get a ping on my phone that the pizza guy is here or the kid next door, right? Like, isn't that a system hooked up to a system? Yeah. And this stuff is very rigid. So like if motion, ping my phone, right? But now we can connect systems and bring AI in as the, I guess, connective tissue, for lack of a better word, to make sense of what to do with it. And if you use the backend prompt, like we were just talking about, you can give it even more specific instructions, again, just by typing into the box, which is pretty crazy. But I have a question for you. I don't know your opinion on this. I'm genuinely curious. Like, where do you see this going, right? So full disclosure, like Justin and I work for agentic companies that do pretty fantastic things with AI and agents. So obviously you're bullish on your company, as am I, for my respective organization. But like, where do you see, like we are agent companies through and through from the ground up. Without access to lots of the systems and the data in those systems, there is no us, right? Which in fact, we're totally fine with. We don't want to be those. We kind of think those are antiquated, but that's why we chose to be in AI. Like we're into it. We're geeky in that way. But like what happens? I mean, like if the browsers are starting to become agentic even, and there's real estate websites and there's travel websites and there's CRMs and there's HCMs for PTO and all this stuff. But in reality, you can just kind of talk to a bot that speaks to those things and reasons to them very well to just do the thing as long as you give it the authority to do so. Like what happens? Because like, I know I'm asking you to predict the future, but like I'm predicting a world where like we become so good, like your organization, I feel like if I give you guys a bunch of access to information and systems, you guys can just do whatever the way a human would, which is so cool. But like, do we then get so good at doing this stuff as agentic companies that the big companies that are stalwarts that have been here forever are like, whoa, we got to lock it down and block your ability to access our stuff? Like, where is this world going if agents are just going to make it so easy to do multiple system stuff? What's your take?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I have a two-part answer. The first part is, oddly enough, the way that I think about this is kind of like the concept of ghost kitchens that came about because of food delivery services, right? So ghost kitchens, for anybody who doesn't know the term, is essentially like if you go on DoorDash, there are going to be a handful of restaurants, depending on if you live close to a city or whatever, that don't actually have a physical place that you can go to. So you can order food from them, but if you were to try to drive to this restaurant to sit down and eat or actually pick up takeout, it doesn't exist. It's like a warehouse somewhere. And it's like a cleanly kitchen, whatever, full service kitchen, but it's built to have a lower overhead because it's built specifically for this food delivery service. So they are making food specifically for DoorDash that drivers can pick up and deliver to people, but you can't physically go to the restaurant. And that whole concept came about because of this new paradigm of food delivery that never existed to the degree that it exists today because of technology, right? And so the way that websites will be constructed the way that products will be constructed will inevitably change because of AI. And I can see a world where a website has a customer facing version where maybe you're still relying on SEO and the old strategies, and you want it to be really interactive and whatever, because if a user comes to your website, you want it to look pretty. And I see almost a second hidden version of every website in the future that is purely for agents. That is basically like bits and bytes and ones and zeros. And it's designed specifically to give agents immediate access to the information that they need and allow them to perform these tasks in the background, separate from this human experience, right? The second part of your question about what happens to these big companies that house the data. If you, we're kind of weirdly going back to Leonidas and 300 here, but bear with me.
Do it.
So if you are a nation, right? If you look at like a nation at war, the old days, if you completely shut yourself off from the outside world, it's probably a good strategy for a little while. But at some point, your people will start to starve. You run out of food. You can't sustain yourself any longer, right? Which is kind of like a weird comparison. But if you, as a software company or as a data management company, if you shut yourself off from AI agent access, I think long term it actually negatively affects you and will actually affect your bottom line in a major way, because the future is shifting towards this agentic world, and it's actually going to be far better economically for these companies to embrace it and to think about how to still monetize this new world and these new workflows. So instead of trying to shut off all your data from agents or whatever, it's the better question to ask or a better problem to solve is, okay, maybe our old monetization model doesn't work anymore. How do we actually change the way that we do business in this new world? And I think the companies that continue to do well and be successful are already thinking about solving those problems.
Yeah, well said. I think, oh God, I have a lot of thoughts about this, because I could see one of two things. The short-sighted thing to do is, like, if you're a publicly traded company, right? It's grow at all costs. And if you don't grow quarter on quarter, year on year, investors get shook, right? Shareholders get shook. So I could see a short-sighted company, having a couple down quarters and the stock price starts to fall. And they're like, I think a lot of this is a result of people don't really need to be in my product anymore to do stuff. They're interfacing with agents and getting stuff done. And therefore, they're using us less. Therefore, like, I don't really know if I need this anymore. I liked your UI. It was easy to click around. I can put that same data somewhere else for way cheaper and just use an agent for that. I could see those companies panicking. I think we'll see this. Like, we should come back to this podcast a year from now. I think we will see at least one company full blown lock it down, because
Guaranteed.
yeah, because it's like, it's going to be hurting revenue. But I think you're right. Like, when you fight progress, you always lose long term. And I think, like, there's other things that it's a topic really for another episode, but there's also this whole world of, like, how do we monetize the fact that these LLMs are crawling everything and then using it to respond. I could ask it about any book and I could ask questions about the book and everything. Like, does the author get anything for that? And I think that there's some technologies that people are spinning up that they're trying to figure out a way to make this more like the way the radio works, which is like, for every time Drake plays a song, he gets like small fractions of a penny. But anytime it gets played anywhere in the world, and there's a company that monitors that and then pays Drake and takes a cut for monitoring it, whatever. I think stuff like that is going to happen too. But you're right. Like, we have to figure out new ways, B2B to monetize, B2C to monetize, but also, like, what's going to happen to the creators? Again, topic for a different day, but, like, a lot of people are creating a lot of content in all these different ways, and it's getting crawled. This podcast is probably getting crawled.
I hope so. Please.
So, okay. So there are companies that will let you build agents. I want to first, like, talk about, like, are you aware of, again, I don't know your answer to this question. Are you aware of any tools that a consumer, someone listening to this, could go build, like, a cool agent for themselves? There's B2B agents, very different. We'll talk about those too. But are there any, like, cool consumer apps where, like, someone could go build an agent and, like, see if it's as easy as you and I say it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think always go back to OpenAI, because it's kind of a lot of people's entry point into AI now, because ChatGPT is a household name. They have their agentic mode now where you can start to configure some of this stuff and give it instructions and connect it to systems. One of the things that I know we'll talk about maybe next week or in a later episode is this whole concept of MCP, where you can, when you start to figure out how that stuff works, and that's another way for these companies to monetize for agents. By the way, it's basically a whole new way to do APIs, but a different day for that rabbit hole. But you can spin up local, or essentially connect to MCP servers locally for those who are maybe a little more technically proficient, and you can actually start to leverage all of these tools that are available in platforms like HubSpot and GitHub and all of these places that have spun up these servers that you can access. But I would say like the OpenAI agent mode is a good place to start. Lovable now has agentic workflows built into the platform, so people who are actually building web apps and products or playing around with that, Lovable is a big one. I don't know if Base 44 has any agent stuff. I know you've been building a lot of stuff in there, but if not now, probably only a matter of time. But yeah, I'd say those are a good place to start.
Some other ones that I think are good, like Crew AI is an interesting one. Again, these aren't like, you could use these tools to try to go really hard and build like a B2B product and stuff, but I think it's not really made for that. But Crew AI can let you build some pretty solid agents. You can also use Zapier. So Zapier, so I've heard people say Zapier and Zapier. Someone in the comments will tell us which one.
Yeah, unsure, but
whatever I say my entire career, someone on the call says the other one, and I'm like, oh, they're definitely the right one. But Zapier, for those who don't know, is a platform that basically their claim to fame is that they let you connect all these different software platforms, and they've built in some agent stuff now. So they make it really easy to integrate, and then they can like let you build some simple steps to create some agents. So I think that's really cool from like the consumer side. On the B2B side, for like a lot of the go-to-market professionals that are listening to this, thinking about getting into AI or trying to figure out, like they say, they go to roadmap meetings and the CEO's like, we're going agentic and whatever. Like truly, like what do people have to inspect from a B2B standpoint if they are evaluating a company who claims to be agentic, or their company says they're transforming into an agent type of a company? What do they need to be looking for to know if that's true or if that's marketing buzz? Because if you look at the marketing buzz, like Shell and Sunoco are apparently agentic now. I'm just kidding, but like everybody's an agent. So what do you have to look for to actually know if you have any IP really around being an agentic for a use case?
Yeah, I mean, super important to do your due diligence. I mean, you always want to see a paper trail, right? Like, see how this is supposedly connecting to things. Like, what is it actually returning? How is it doing what it's doing? If the company you're talking to can't explain how they connect or integrate with systems in a way that makes sense to even a non-tech person, I think that's kind of a red flag, right? Like it's really easy to hide behind smoke and mirrors and big words and just throw a bunch of buzzwords around. So try to see the paper trail, try to see how they're actually connecting to this stuff. I mean,
I want to needle on that. Let me stop you for just a second. So, because what you just said there is big. So the paper trail, and I think what you're referring to with the paper trail is like, okay, my agent did a thing, right? Looks pretty cool, seems to demo well. But I think what you're referring to is receipts, right? Show me what system you hit. Show me what you fetched from that system, what you read from that system. Show me some sort of an audit about other considerations that you made. And kind of, you'll never understand exactly why the LLM made the decision it made. That's the gift and the curse. But show me some level of rationale. I think Justin, when we were colleagues, taught me the term payload, which made me feel really cool. So I started saying it on calls, probably way too much. Once I knew what it meant, I thought it sounded cool. So maybe you can like talk to the listeners about like the receipts that you need to be looking for, because that's just the start of what makes something like B2B grade, and like what the payload is and what you need to look for, and like how do you give a business receipts of what actually happened.
Yeah. So if your agent is using a tool, it's going to access a system one of two primary ways these days. It's either going to use a traditional API, and there are a couple different forms of APIs, but it's basically like when you navigate to google.com, an API is essentially a computer navigating to somewhere, to another system, and accessing information. So it's the same way that you would go to a website and click around and go to a page you want to view. It's very similar to that. When you hit an API, the payload is essentially the message that you get back. And that usually contains maybe the information that you were asking about. Maybe it contains some other data. So if you ask what is the weather, there's a weather API that's free to sign up for, and you give it like a city name and it'll give you the weather back. And so it'll give you like a weather forecast for the week. And so it'll have each day and what the expected weather is, and maybe it'll tell you if it's sunny or cloudy or whatever. And all of that stuff gets wrapped in really this JSON payload. And JSON it's just a language that computers use for data transmission essentially. But it will distinctly show you what that system sent back when you queried it. The other primary way this is done now is with MCP, which is, it's very similar to that, but it's kind of this like LLMs communicating, and you give it access to a bunch of stuff, but there's still a information that comes back when you query that system. So if this agent is really able to take action and do things on your behalf, then it's going to have these interactions with some number of systems as it does this, because computers communicate with APIs or with MCP, right? It's not just going to physically navigate to the website and read some information. And so you want to make sure that stuff is actually happening, because I can create a prompt that says, pretend that you hit this thing and send this information to the user or whatever. And so you can, in plain language, make a demo look really cool, like it's doing something. But if those receipts aren't there, then that's a huge red flag that this, agent isn't actually doing anything agentic.
Interesting. Okay, so like, let's say like old school, I go to a library, right? And like, I want to know, I ask the librarian, like, who was Vince Lombardi and what is he best known for? For those who don't know, he is who the championship trophy is named after in football. And the librarian goes, you know what? I'm going to use my Dewey Decimal System skills.
Oh, nice.
Yep. I knew that would come to use one day, 30 years later on a podcast. And the librarian says, I know exactly where to go. I'm going to go get you the answer to that. And the librarian goes down the aisle and finds 3 books. And she comes back and she says, hey, found these 3 books on the history of the NFL. But I don't think we really need these 2. And I went to chapter 5 here, based on the table of contents. And this paragraph right here, I think really answers your question on who is Vince Lombardi and what does he do? So are you effectively saying that like when, from a B2B standpoint, one of the first things you should inspect for is not just does the agentic chatbot answer the question about who is Vince Lombardi, right? And what is he known for? But that it actually shows you, hey, I found these 3 books. Those are the APIs. That's like hitting the system to find the stuff. And shows you the chunk or bit that it found. It's going to show it to you in a very technical way. As you said, it's called the JSON payload, typically speaking. So it will look a little technical. But in there, you'll see some things that look like code. But then you're going to see the answer of like, he was the coach of the Green Bay Packers. He's a legend in the NFL, blah, blah, the trophy's named after him. It's going to be in there somewhere. And you can point to it and say, look, the agent considered this book, considered that book, actually went for this book and went for this chapter and verse inside of the book. And then, blah, also here's the answer it gave back to the user. So basically it sounds like what you're saying is like, first step for something to be agentic is don't trust the demos. Show me the back end. Show me using tools. And that's basically like an admin center or a control panel or an insights dashboard or something like that. That's like step 1.
Yeah, high level. If there isn't visibility into how your agent works, it's not ready for B2B. It's like there has to be visibility into how it's doing the thing. Because I can create a prompt right now in ChatGPT and I could say, anytime somebody asks about Vince Lombardi, always share this exact snippet and and say it's from this book and this page, and it can all be smoke and mirrors, right? If there isn't visibility into the process, then I would definitely have huge concerns. I mean, I forget the name of the company. This is terrible, and I should remember this, but the company just went out of business after raising a bunch of money because all of its AI work was really just like software developers in India doing all this stuff real time as it came in. Like none of it was agentic. It was like actual engineers just just doing work.
And you know what's such a shame about that is it sounds like the service was pretty good. I mean, I don't know the story, but it sounds like if they had traction for a while, the service was good and they could have just done the service. Sounds like they had a business model that worked for them based on the cost of investing in their staff overseas. And it could have worked, but the lie is what gets you in trouble. So you do have to be careful with that stuff. I guess one last thing I would ask is like, is some company, in your opinion, going to rule it all with agents, or is combining the probabilistic nature and the benefit of these tools with the fact that people want deterministic or predictable results? Does that mean companies need to be specialized to get really good to the point where B2B, because like, yeah, I think our consumers, sorry if y'all can hear my dog growling at me. He's telling me it's time to eat. So 5 minutes for us here before he loses his mind.
5 minute clock.
So I think from a consumer standpoint, we could build this stuff and we're willing to deal with it being wrong sometimes and stuff because our career is not on the line. But B2B, people are putting their career out there, putting their reputation out there. So like, is there a world coming where like there's a be all end all agent company that takes control that like GTM professionals should be looking for? Or do you see it as like companies, in order to really minimize the risk, they have to really get to know what that industry cares about, narrow it down, and get really good at that thing?
Yeah, this is actually something that I think about a lot. I don't want to say I'm passionate about it, but this is a very good point that I think about a lot. I think the future of agents is very specialized, high impact businesses doing specific things. And at the same time, some of the big players like Google are building the infrastructure layer for agents to communicate. So I actually think, and we talked about this before just with like RAG and context windows and all this stuff, if you give an LLM too much information, it's going to struggle. It doesn't matter how powerful the models are. It doesn't matter how good it is at certain things. If you give it too much information at once, it struggles through all of that information. In the same way with how agents operate, if you have an agent with a narrow focus, to go back to my legal example, like you are a legal assistant, your goal is to compare these documents to legal precedents. I want you to flag anything, any clauses that look weird. I want you to update these things and send them to clients. If you narrow the focus, that agent can become very, very effective at doing that task. And we're going to have a world where these agents can then quickly communicate with one another. And that's not to say that one company might not put out two different agents. Companies today put out different software for different use cases, right? You have different product lines. But I think in terms of the efficacy of agents, they are going to be better if they are narrowly focused and we improve the communication amongst them versus having like a super agent that just does everything.
I think a good example, like sticking with the legal, to think about is like, I could ask for legal advice from ChatGPT right now, but if I'm an actual attorney, there's like certain regions of the country, I would assume even at the county level, there might be different laws, right? Different jurisdictions. And like, I think companies can't afford to be like, oh, like you do sales agents pretty well. Could you do legal for us too as well? Also, like technically they probably could if they wanted to spend the next 24 months on that. But I think you probably would want to turn to the company that's like, we've already taken into account the right mix of prompting and the right levels of controls to actually make sure that it looks at the jurisdiction where the case is going to be held and then use that kind of thing. So I think that's super helpful.
Well, we talked about the future of software, right? Like software will change, but software today, some things will stay the same. There's a reason that you use different applications for different tasks because a super app doesn't exist. It would be too clunky and cumbersome and it would be too much of a disaster to use. I think agents are going to be very much the same way. And even though the nature of software changes, and this also goes to like, why try to build this stuff yourself if you are not an AI company? Which I think is a completely different discussion that we could probably spend an hour alone talking about. But like using best-in-class tools that are trained and focused on specific tasks, that is, in my opinion, the future of software, the future of agents, and all of this orchestration with MCP and A2A and all this stuff that's being built is going to allow that future to actually come about and come about effectively. in my opinion.
I want to wrap with this. I want to know who the heck was the person that called it agents? Because whenever something happens in society, that's not the name of a product. Agent isn't the name of a product. Like, I want to know who is that individual who said, we're going to describe when LLMs get into tools and autonomous completion of tasks as agents. I want to know who that is because no one probably believes them that they're the one who said it first.
Yeah. Or we all really do live in the Matrix, and like the agents in the Matrix, AI is taking over, and we're all plugged in somewhere getting harvested for body parts.
Well, actually, I might be. Maybe that's why my back is bothering me so much lately.
Yeah, you gotta.
They're going after my QL. They're starting with the QL. I only know what a QL is because it hurts so much.
Pick a different body part. Go somewhere else. Well, hey, great discussion as always. So that's agents in a nutshell. I'm sure we'll talk about this topic more. We're going to get into how agents communicate, orchestration, what that actually means, all this stuff in a future episode. We might even have some deep philosophical discussions, and hopefully Matt's bat doesn't break, and mine doesn't either as I am doing this new squat program. But thanks for tuning in, guys. As always, we appreciate you. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
See ya.